No, I don't become a submarine, but I wouldn't mind being able to self-destruct. There any car thieves out there in the audience? Oh, and happy birthday, cameraman. Hello everybody, Sparkster1701 here, and we're taking a look at another vintage Generation 1 Transformer toy. For the benefit of those of you who weren't around with us last year, my birthday is on Sunday, so happy birthday to me. Thank you for all your wishes out there. But I share my birthday with author Ian Fleming, the man who created James Bond. So it seems fitting and kind of fun to find a Transformer that I can loosely tie into the 007 franchise. Whether it be the books or the movies, whatever works out. Now, there is somebody in the line that has a better connection than this guy does, but I didn't have him completed at the time that I made out the schedule. Plus, this is a guy I haven't covered, nor have I covered really the subgroup that he's involved in. I've sort of done something like him, but let's get it on and grab your shaken martinis, because today we're going to take a look at a battle charger, the Generation 1 Decepticon Shock Trooper Runabout. Runabout here was released in 1986, and he would only be available for that year. He would be discontinued in 1987, and he would be replaced with the Terrorcon Cutthroat. Of course, Runabout wouldn't be the only one of his kind. He was also sold alongside his buddy, Runamuck. These two were apparently done up to cash in on the semi-success of the Autobot jump starters from the previous year, Twin Twist and Top Spin. As they both four of these toys featured a similar gimmick in that once they were in their vehicle modes, you would utilize their pullback motors and let them race across the floor, and then at some point they would automatically transform into their robot modes. However, the Decepticon Battle Chargers benefited more from the mistakes and lessons and complaints that Hasbro likely received due to the many failures that the Autobot jump starters suffered during their tenure. Also, unlike their jump starter counterparts released the previous year, Runabout and his buddy Runamuck would be released as carded figures. Of course, let's also not forget that the name Runabout works well as a commonly used term in various forms of science fiction. The Star Wars toy line featured a character that was also called Runabout. But of course, Runabout is also from Star Trek, utilizing the Danube-class spaceships that were seen throughout the 7 years of Deep Space Nine. Now let's take a better look here at the Decepticon Runabout, and first thing you're going to notice for articulation is that he has very, very little. I mean, the arms do not move at all, except up at the shoulder. You can kind of bring his arm back a bit. But otherwise, you really can't do much with it, and it's even more restricted on whichever one that has the gun on it. So it's kind of, you can aim the gun very, very slightly in front of him, so he really doesn't have a lot of range of motion, and most of the rest of it is to help with his transformation. Like, he's got a joint here at the angle, so you can, if you can pose him right with some fishing line, you can make it look like he's trying to do a jump kick, but the sort of blank look that he has there just doesn't work with it. Then, of course, with the spring-loaded mechanism that keeps him upright, you can have him sort of do a layback and shoot upwards at an angle, or try to look like he's in the Matrix. I think Keanu Reeves did it better. Alright, now to transform Runabout into his alternate mode. And that's a pretty simple thing. But there is one thing I want to make sure before we do that I point out to you. For some of you fans, you might be a little bit on the picky side about it. It is right here in the back side. Trying to get it at a right angle here. We're going to take his gun out for a second. That'd be the first step in transforming him. Wiggle, wiggle. We want to use it as a pointer here. This plastic bar right here, above where the gun is pointing at. This plastic bar you'll want to check on loose samples. If this plastic bar is broken off, then he will not lock into his car mode. He'll automatically flip back up into the robot mode. So if you're picky about this sort of thing, this is something you will want to check on. It is very thin, and it does get fragile easily. It does stress wear, and it does break easily. That Runamuck that you saw earlier, that's my second Runamuck, because my original one, this piece in here broke out of it, and he could no longer transform. And for this channel, that's a no-no. We got to be able to transform them. Now, without his gun in the way, first step to changing him is take the rear end of the car and fold it over his head. Where'd everybody go? Then next, we'll take the back of his legs, the rear portion of the car. You fold it up and just gently snap it into place. That's what causes that piece to break, is if you force it. So don't force it. Or as you can see, he wears out and it just automatically pops. Then next, you'll take his arms, fold them down at the sides. And then lastly, make sure to fold down the front of his legs, and then gently push it in, snap it into place. And there is his alternate mode, the thing that we use to tie into the James Bond movies. Runabout here transforms into a Lotus Esprit, which was a similar car that appeared in 2 of Roger Moore's movies, famously becoming a submarine in The Spy Who Loved Me, and also having the best anti-theft device ever installed into a car in For Your Eyes Only. Now, there are some fans that like to argue that the Battle Chargers here have the same car mode, and that isn't true. As you'll see here, side by side, we'll set in Runamuck in front, and aside from the color difference, you can obviously see that Runamuck does not have a rear spoiler here. But also, when you take a look at the front ends of the cars, we'll move the camera so we can make it a little closer here, you can see that Runabout here, the headlights are the style that raise up on the fancy sports cars, whereas here, the front end pattern on Runamuck is distinctly more familiar for another famous vehicle. Runamuck here is a Pontiac Trans Am, similar to the car that Burt Reynolds drove famously in the Smokey and the Bandit movies, or in this case, This is Kit from Knight Rider. This is the car Burt Reynolds drove. And as you can see, especially when we put Burt's car in front, how sort of similar they are. Of course, probably, if we put Runamuck here in the black color, he probably couldn't have been mistaken. He probably would have been mistaken for Kit. Just not as much of a smart aleck. Okay, now we're out here on my dining room floor, and we're going to have Runabout here, demonstrate his transforming into his robot mode. Basically, just like how the others were. We'll pull him back, he'll roll along, pop up as a robot, and keep going, unlike the Autobot versions. So, here we go. And right into the bookcase. Nice job, Runabout. In case any of you are wondering, this is why he ended up crashing into the bookcase. Couldn't see where he was going. Alright, now we're going to take a look at his accessory, and he only came with one. This is his gun. What the instructions describe as a high-energy particle beam rifle. I kind of like the fact that it's got a nice scope there on the top of it. It connects through this slot, this post and slot here, in between things. It just fits snugly in his shoulder. Also, Runamuck could carry it as well. I like the fact that they put it in red, so it does stand in a nice contrast against him. It's not a bad accessory when you consider what little we're getting with them. But, I'll demonstrate for you here. You see, nice notch right here in his shoulder. It's on both shoulders, so more or less, however you want to mount it. There we go. And he's all mounted and ready to go. We're looking at something fascinating behind me. But I ain't falling for it. Now we'll take a look at Runabout's card backer here. It's not in the best shape, but does have a rather nice picture of him. Just gives the impression, somewhat, that the legs could separate, which they don't. On the back side, despite the fact that they was released in predominantly in 1986, they still have the 1985 mural. And then down here we have the instructions. And yes, he did come with some stickers, basically red stripes that would go around him in various spots on the car. Unfortunately, this one did not have them. They're frequently lost, but you can kind of get an idea of them by looking at Runamuck here, since he had similar ones, like predominantly they would be on the arms and at the front bumper. But Runabout has them in a few different places, as you'll soon see. We'll bring it up a little closer here. Show you how to race him on the floor. Attach his gun. And then how to transform him back for another round of running on the hardwood floors. I can imagine those of you who had little tiny animals growing up probably had fun rolling these things at them. Watching your puppies or kitties or whatever go nuts chasing them or getting spooked by them. As you can see right here, here's placement of the labels. And of course, mention of the heat-sensitive rub signs and the robot points. Down here at the bottom, he was worth 1 point. And now we rotate it to the side so we can take a look at his tech spec. As you can see, it does use the same picture, more complete than what it was here on the front, due to what the previous owner did to get it out. It's all done in purple to show he's a Decepticon. It lists him as a battle charger, and it gives his name as Runabout, and lists his function as shock trooper. Now, a shock trooper, in the military sense, was used as a special type of trooper that specialized in breaching enemy defenses and barricades. Basically, getting through, being one of the few to get through it first and start assailing the enemy from behind their defenses. So in many ways, assigning both Runabout here and his buddy Runamuck as shock troopers works pretty well with their battle charger abilities. You set up some blocks or something else that would fall apart easily, children's blocks, Lincoln logs, that sort of thing, as a cheap barricade, and then drive these guys through it. And that would basically be how a shock trooper works. So, good job to Hasbro for assigning them a useful function to go with their play feature. And continuing along here, it gives his motto as, "A pretty car makes an even prettier wreck. Likes to watch things blow up. The bigger the explosion, the better. Uses parked cars and gas station fuel pumps for target practice. Usually stays busy as a battle charger, but terrified of boredom. Maximum speed 185 miles per hour. Range 550 miles. Has high energy particle beam rifle. Easily distracted by a beautiful car because he wants to destroy it, not admire it." Sounds a little psychotic there, doesn't he, folks? Moving right along to the grid, we place the decoder over it, and let's take a look at his stats. It lists his strength as 6, his intelligence is 7, his speed is also 7, his endurance is also 7, his rank is 6, his courage is 7, as is his firepower and his skill. So there's another thing to link him to 007. He's got a lot of 7s on his score. Now we get down to my thoughts. What do I think of Runabout? Runabout's an interesting character. He's one of the few in the Transformer line, especially among the Decepticons, that can easily be described as a serial killer. His desire to constantly stay busy due to the fact that he fears boredom makes him somewhat of an interesting character, but in terms of actual military usefulness, that probably doesn't make him as effective of a soldier. While he's pretty good at his job of being a shock trooper and crashing through barricades and whatnot to get at Autobots, the fear of being bored and not having anything to do does limit and make him a bit of a liability. Because if the mission requires him to wait for things, he's likely to get bored and go off and blow something up, thus blowing his cover. However, he does serve as a good counter with his buddy Runamuck, due to the fact that Runamuck appreciates destroyed things like they were fine art. So the two of them do get along pretty well in terms of the lore. As a toy, the Runabout is a bit of an improvement over the two jump starters that were released the year prior. They aren't perfect, so I won't try to tout them to you as something that they are not. As toys, in general, I would put them in the middle. I would put him in the middle tier, but just barely. I mean, there isn't going to be much demand for a figure that's somewhat on the psychotic side and just barely on the edge of being usable militarily wise in battle. So that works against him. But the fact that you can always count on them popping up and being on their feet more often than what the Autobot versions were does help improve them a bit over their Autobot counterparts. So, Runabout, you're going into the middle, but you just barely make the grade due to the fact that you're somewhat useless militarily, and then there's the fact that you have very little posability whatsoever. And that concludes my review of the Generation 1 Decepticon Shock Trooper Runabout. If you like the video, please thumbs up it here on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button down below if you haven't already. And please do post comments down below. I appreciate getting feedback from my viewers. And also, don't forget, fans, if you haven't looked into it already, next month is Pete's Robot Convention in Covington, Kentucky. So please, if you have not already, check it out at petesrobocon.com. And next month, fans, we've got a special theme month coming up. I'm going to look at 5 import toys from my personal collection. Only some of them have made a brief appearance throughout the history of this channel, and the others have never been seen before. So I'm real excited to show these off to you. Please look forward to them. This is Sparkster1701 saying I will catch you all later.